Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. I thought I'd demo my latest brush set for you. I'm planning on doing a little more of this to show how some of my brushes work and the thinking behind them. So let me know if it helps you and if you're interested in seeing more. So this set is called Forest Blockers, and I've called them that because they're quite handy for doing things like foliage and leaves and abstract textures like that, but they're really designed for just adding any kind of painterly strokes or abstract textures to your work. They're not texture brushes in the way that they don't have a texture embedded in them. So what I'll do is I'll just show you a texture brush first and the contrast of how that works, so you can have an idea of the way that they work. So here's a halftone brush I made from a set. Here's one I made earlier. And the way that a texture brush works is that it reveals, effectively, imagine if the texture is a hidden layer underneath. So as you paint a stroke, that layer is being revealed, and that's how a texture works. And in the brush settings, there's different ways to play with that. So under the where the texture is, you have the texture, and you can change the scale it's at and how prominent it is and things like that. So that control is always there, so that you've got a little variety. But without doing that, whenever you do a new stroke, whether it's a different size or a different colour, it's just painting the same texture that's there. So there's no real randomness, although it can add a lot of effects to your work. So what I wanted to do was to create a set, which I do with a lot of my brushes lately, where you have random elements. So I'll show you these. So they're all created using the same brush head, the shape of the brush, but they're set out in different ways. So first of all, I'll show you how it works, and then the brush settings behind it. So they're designed really to kind of block in colours very quickly with random strokes. And you'll see if I do a stroke, let's zoom into 100%. If I do a stroke and do it again, it's coming up with different patterns every time. So if I do it with a texture brush, just for comparison, you're getting exactly the same every time. So there's a random element there. So they're designed to very quickly layer down colours like so. There's a few things that I do to add an element of control and variety to that as well. So often when I'm using a brush, in the brush settings, I'll turn off the transfer if I want a more opaque direct paint look. And you can see immediately it's a lot darker with no translucency. So sometimes that can be a very good way of laying down colours very quickly, like so, and then I'll add the transfer afterwards to effectively do like a little blending like that. So that's the first brush. I've called that one Forest Blockers Dense, because I call it dense because it's really quick to block in and layer colours like so. This one is called the Painter Brush. Let's do a different colour so you can see. So designed more for kind of adding details, as if you were painting trees, for instance. You've got a little more control for fine strokes, and again, in the brush settings, you can turn off the transfer to give it a more opaque, direct paint look, like so. So I'll often switch between turning transfer on and off for things to help with the effects. This one is called the Overlay Brush. I think really I called it that because I imagined it being used over the top of some of the other textures. So let's choose a different colour so you can see. So like so. But you can use them and blend them in any order you want. It's just it's always good to have an idea how things are intended, but it doesn't mean it's their final output. This one I've called texture. So again, I'll choose a different colour. I'm not really thinking about painting at the moment, I'm more just trying to show what the brushes do, like so. So if you wanted to add kind of a bit of a gritty kind of a texture, then you can do that. I think I've got a little bit of half-tone brush in there, which I always like to do. And the last one I've called vines, and again it's like the painter brush in that it's designed for a bit more fine control, like so. And again you can turn transfer off if you want to do maybe a few more details or something like that. So sometimes I'll turn transfer off so that I can add in, you know, bits of light or whatever. So getting a balance between using transfer on and off just adds a little variety to the painting as well. And obviously this is very abstract, but you can go in and refine and blend and do as much as you want. But they're designed really to help you lay down colours quickly and add a bit of texture and just stop things looking a bit too much the samey. So I'll show you just a little of how the brushes work, and you might want to make your own or play with these. So let's choose the first one and I'll do a new layer. So whenever I create a brush I use a brush shape, so in this case you can see the shape of the brushes. Let me turn off transfer, turn off scattering, that, and shape dynamics. So that's the shape of the brush itself. It's always fun to play around with different brush shapes, and you can go into edit, define brush preset, and it will take the black elements and you'll have a brush head there, and then from there you can start to create a brush. So the way this one works, I have the size and the roundness set to pen pressure with maximum control, so that means at 0 or 1%, so that you can go from thin to thick, and the shape of the brush will change as well. I have the angle jitter set to 7% on this one, so the angle jitter, so if you did a straight line, it just adds a little bit of wobble, which most people think is best avoided, but actually when you're painting or drawing traditionally there's always a coarseness to the paper or something that just causes the line to be slightly imperfect. So sometimes avoiding that digital look is best done by the imperfection rather than perfection. And again it's adding limitations which can actually free you up a bit as well. So I have scattering on, so scattering, if I turn it off, you can see the brush does that. If I turn it on, it just changes the, yeah, well I'll turn it higher and then you can see, there, it's normally set to 93, there we go. So it kind of, if I turn it really high, you can see the brush head is kind of dotting in different places. So the scattering adds another element of randomness to each stroke. And of course you want that kind of within controllable parameters, because otherwise it can be too high and hard to control. But it's a fun thing to play around with. Colour dynamics I love to have a hue jitter just fairly low, but there. So what that does is it just adds different hues. So whatever hue you've got selected, it will add hues depending on how high the jitter is set either side of that, so that you'll get different colours, so that I can then pick from different colours there. And again, it's a bit like if you're blending traditional media paints, it won't just be one solid pure colour. There will be different ratios of where the blend of the paint is mixed. So it's just a way of emulating that, really. And the main thing I have set is called dual brush. Dual brush is where you have this brush head combined with another brush head, which creates an element of randomness. So in this case, let's see if I can see the one I've got selected. Here we go. So I created this brush shape, and it's using the head of a brush from a previous set with it. So if I turn dual brush off, you can see this is just the brush on its own, which is still quite nice, and you might want to play around with that. If I turn dual brush on, then it's the other brush head is effectively masking, I think, underneath it to add another element of randomness. And again, you can play around with that. So the spacing will mean that the texture is a little further apart, and the lower the spacing, the more dense or opaque it will be. Scattering again adds that element of randomness, kind of, so if it was a straight line, how far from either side of the line it would be, and count is how dense it is. So normally I have count at 1, but if you put it higher, it would be a lot more opaque. The size affects the brush, so this brush here that is underneath my brush head, it affects the size of that. So you can see here it's changing how it will lay down. So these are all fun things to play with, and it means that you can take any brush you've got in your library, go into dual brush, and you can select another brush and get different types of effects and random strokes. It's a really fun thing to play with and have a go at yourself. So all of the brushes in the set are using this principle, but in different ways. I think that's about it, really. Any questions, let me know in the comments. Hope you liked this, and let me know if you'd like to see more. I hope you enjoyed the brush set, and if you do use them, please share with me what you've done. I'd love to see. Alright, take care. Bye.